Dr. Catherine Bankole Medina, and I am providing some post-interview lecture notes on Dr. Samuel A. Cartwright. And within recent weeks, he has been a source of great discussion and debate among my students, and so I wanted to outline further some thoughts on Samuel Cartwright and his racial theories. Now let's begin with a review. Samuel Cartwright was a medical doctor who was born in Fairfax County, Virginia. He practiced medicine in the South, and he received many awards and quite a bit of recognition for his work. He was a medical student. He had 2 apprenticeships. Most notably, he was an apprentice to Dr. Benjamin Rush of Philadelphia, and most of you are familiar with Dr. Rush and his work in the development of public health. He's also known as an abolitionist who actually condemned slavery, even though he did own one slave, as an aside. He did not appear to believe in the inferiority of the races of man, but he did have some interesting views on the skin color of blacks, which he had described as a form of leprosy. So Dr. Cartwright studied with Dr. Benjamin Rush, and certainly was able to glean a lot that aided him in his future as a medical doctor. Cartwright attended the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, and he spent some time in Europe. By the time he got there, European doctors were familiar with his work, and he received quite a bit of recognition while there. Later in his career, he became a surgeon under General Andrew Jackson, and worked on behalf of the Confederacy up until his death. But in terms of his practice, he practiced medicine primarily in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, and notably New Orleans, Louisiana. And he was considered a foremost expert in cholera, yellow fever, and sanitation, health, and maintenance. Now, cholera, as most of you already know, is an intestinal infection. Cartwright wrote quite a bit about cholera, about the symptoms of cholera, the attendant diarrhea, and that it was transmitted through contaminated water and food. The chief problem with cholera is that it causes extreme dehydration, which in turn causes mortality. Cartwright was also very, very interested in and did quite a bit of work on yellow fever. He had been faced with this illness in several venues. He understood it as a viral disease transmitted by mosquitoes. He understood the hemorrhaging aspects of it and the symptoms, which included fever, nausea, headache. But then there were some severe aspects of cholera, which included even organ failure, heart damage, etc., etc. So Cartwright had extensive understanding of some of the chief diseases and ailments that confronted people in the antebellum period. He spent quite a bit of time researching and writing, formulating clinical theories, which many people read and followed and studied. As an aside, he was married, and his wife, her father, happened to be a doctor, and they had at least one child. Now, I want to say something about the views of Cartwright that appear to captivate society in a very profound way in our contemporary times. Cartwright was considered during his time an authority on African American health and medicine. He contributed quite a bit of literature to this area, and it was rooted in the idea of ultimately defending the institution of enslavement. But Cartwright is well known for his ideas on slavery and medicine, particularly in the area of what was termed Negro or slave diseases. And the two that seem to capture the attention of students today more than anything else, it would appear, would be the disease of Drapetomania and the second, Dysaesthesia Aethiopica. Now, we can talk quite a bit about other Negro slave diseases, but I'm just going to focus on those two for today. 20 years ago, when I was writing about Drapetomania, the only people who understood this term were scholars working in the field of slavery and medicine, and very few of those. And so it was even an anomaly then to study it. Today, it's everywhere. You can see it, and people are very fascinated by it. You just check the blogs, and you'll see all of the attention given to it. But we get our understanding of this antebellum concept of Drapetomania under the topic of Negro slave diseases as one of Cartwright's major medical theories regarding African Americans. And Drapetomania was the disease said to cause black people who were enslaved to want to free themselves, so that if a slave ran away, had thoughts of running away, wanted to escape bondage, they could be, under Cartwright's designation, diagnosed with Drapetomania. And so he went further. He didn't just drop the term into the medical discussion. He actually elucidated the term. So he said that Drapetomania was a mental disorder, that it was related to a form of mania or madness, and that a prescription for Drapetomania would be to keep the enslaved persons in a submissive state, in an infantile state, if you will, and to keep them from running away. He went on to say that if they continued to have thoughts of freedom and thoughts of running away, another prescription is that they could be whipped, and this would be something of a cure. So in describing this theory of Drapetomania, the desire of enslaved Africans to run away, Cartwright used and relied heavily on biblical scriptures and passages dealing with slavery. And so you'll find a lot of attention to Drapetomania because in contemporary society, people tend to want to be free, or to believe that they want to be free. So the idea that one could be diagnosed with a disease for wanting freedom and that great extension of democracy is interesting.
All power to the people is becoming a reality because the people have come out here to stand for hours, to stand if necessary for days in front of these pig court buildings to demand that Huey P. Newton be set free.
Yes, sir. I could be parallel to bad as hell, equivalent to ignorant. Depends on the matter, well, if it's that insignificant, I just have to tell a nigga to kick rocks with flip-flops. Rapper ever tell to sit in the cell to snitch high. I ain't paying the disc job, he ain't getting the wristwatch. I'm the realest to make it, he taking dick in the shit box. I kinda get why I'm legit, mostly to the folks who think dominant. I see why this honest shit is so prominent. See the kids that's rhyming it, that ain't live, not a line of it. You ain't hood money, not good money, you're counterfeit. The kind of vagina I get on some Lola Falana shit. Interstate 95 in it, with that coke and them llamas, bitch. Hold up, what time is it? The clock strike 10. I guarantee none of y'all be on the block like him. Cock the fifth back, you get baffled. Click clack, you skedaddle. Lot of niggas bust their guns, but not like them. The record labels are scared of me, internet gotta back me. First they said I was gangster, then they said not exactly. I rap about politicians, rap about protectors. The loser maneuvers, the Edgar Hoover reenacted. Being them on my black shit, they be trying to silence me. But to do that shit, they'll have to do it violently. Clack, clack, that, back, back, rat, that, that, that. A lot of niggas bust their guns, but not like them.
A lot of niggas bust their guns, but not like them. Y'all niggas is lukewarm, y'all ain't hot like them. Them motherfuckers, my brothers, they are not my friends. We the band with the bond, from grams on the home. A lot of niggas bust their guns, but not like them. Y'all niggas is lukewarm, y'all ain't hot like them. Them motherfuckers, my brothers, they are not my friends. We the band with the bond, from grams on the arm, the uncut dope. You had to land on the farm, rapping in arenas, rubber bands to the moms, getting high to Sinatra in the sands of the palms, reminiscing on rapping with Big. The man was a don. Niggas did it big, but not like them. Drink champagne in the ocean just to drown my sins. Should I pray when ballet pull around my bends? Cause niggas know my beginning, but not my end. Yeah, it's me and Saigon and the Pisons. Network behind us like we Verizon. Go ahead and chill out, get your vibe on. Cause this could be the day that you died on.
You know, I don't think people really understand that Saigon guy. That guy is a different breed. Save it, Private Brian. Save it, Private Brian.
The second slave disease that we attributed to Cartwright would be Dysaesthesia Aethiopica. This is a disease that was thought to also be one that affected the body and the mind, and it also had some other interesting attendant features. First of all, it was believed that it contributed to a lack of work ethic among enslaved Africans, so that if they didn't want to work, labor as slaves, then of course this is a disease. Overseers tended to label this as rascality. The idea that when an enslaved person acted out in protest of slavery, whether it be some form of perceived mischief or petty hostility, they were exhibiting signs of a disease. And this was ostensibly characterized by skin that was insensitive, and also it was considered a mental disability, that somehow the intellect was dulled as a result of Dysaesthesia Aethiopica. And in one sense, Cartwright described it as the person appearing to be half asleep. Other symptoms of Dysaesthesia Aethiopica included scars on the body. Also, Cartwright designated the disease as being much more prominent among free blacks, especially free blacks who lived together in their own enclaves, and that he suggested that free blacks were more subject to Dysaesthesia Aethiopica than the slaves on the plantations, primarily because of the idea that the slaves on the plantation don't recognize freedom, don't understand the idea of freedom, and so therefore they were less likely to be stricken with this particular disease. And so while we find these views interesting today, of course, this type of scientific racism of the antebellum period has been discredited when we look into the history of African American health and medical care. But we do need to make sure that we continue to discuss the context of the slave diseases, especially in the antebellum period. You have a situation where Southerners consider blacks racially inferior to whites, mentally and physically. You have the prevailing arguments and theories that advanced the support of slavery, the subjugation of blacks, in order to challenge the abolitionist movement. You have the desire for doctors to contribute to this pro-slavery argument in their search for scientific proof that slavery should be sustained. And then you also have this desire to expound upon or somehow extricate the psychological conditions of African Americans. And almost always, ultimately, the psychological determinations ended up in one destination, and that was in inferiority. Because Cartwright believed that black people as a whole were incapable of governing themselves, looking after themselves, working properly. Civilization wasn't even a notion. So this was part of the social context. Another aspect of that had to do with the fact that scientists who looked at racial theories, such as Thomas Roderick Drew, who you know was one of the early presidents of the College of William and Mary, a prolific writer as well as educator, very much advancing the pro-slavery cause. His ideas fit very neatly into Cartwright's because he believed that slaves were not fit for the condition of freedom. And of course, we're familiar with James D.B. DuBois, who was a Southern magazine publisher, a statistician. He was also head of the census and stationed in New Orleans, Louisiana. DuBois very much supported Cartwright's work, published his articles, many articles in DuBois' review. The Northern reaction was varied. Eventually, Northerners dismissed Cartwright's views on Negro slave diseases, largely because they saw his views as being too aligned with the politics of the day, or sectionalism. And a lot of the medical journals went out of their way to demonstrate that they were providing information that was, if you will, somewhat apolitical, but certainly not so sectional as to distract their readers. And so, even though they did publish Cartwright's views, the closer we get to the Civil War, the more distance we see with respect to Cartwright and his views, because they were concerned about the contours of medicine as a professional practice. They were concerned about any nuances of quackery or ideas that would suggest quackery, and threaten their views of scientific legitimacy. And there were other doctors as well who went on to either build upon Cartwright's work or were aligned with those racial theories under slavery and medicine. Many are familiar with Josiah Nott, who was a doctor and a surgeon. He, like Cartwright, studied at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Nott mostly founded on mostly was concerned with climate, racial differences, and how climate contributed to the issue of race. But Nott's claim to fame was really around the area of yellow fever. And he's the doctor who's credited with helping us understand that yellow fever was transmitted by mosquitoes. Nott argued that slavery was the perfect condition for blacks. Nott was a follower of Morton, that is Samuel George Morton, who was a doctor and natural scientist. He was considered the father of ethnography, and also we're familiar with his cranial studies, where he suggested that Europeans and others on the racial hierarchy scales of the day found people of African descent at the bottom based on cranial size or cranial capacity. And those as well have been debunked. Also, he advanced polygenism rather than monogenism, meaning that they believed that man was comprised of more than one species. Different species of men existed, as opposed to monogenism, where you have one species of man that we are all connected to. And that helped to explain why they perceived blacks to be so different and how they continue to justify it. Now, during the American Civil War, Cartwright, of course, joined the Confederate States of America, and he had the responsibility of improving the sanitation in the military camps in Vicksburg, in Mississippi, Port Hudson, Louisiana. And Cartwright was honored for his investigations, of course, into yellow fever and Asiatic cholera. In fact, one obituary for Cartwright stated that he left the world much better than he found it. So Samuel Cartwright, who would have been considered a doctor, having made credible contributions to the area of yellow fever and Asiatic cholera, was also a doctor who developed scientific medical racism in the antebellum period, and can be very much considered an authority on African American health and medicine, work that has been debunked and decredited today, but work which probably more than anything gives us great insight into the racial mindset of the antebellum period and the desire to continue the enslavement of people of African descent.